Hello. Welcome to the Christchurch Fox Chapel podcast. Well, it's the fastest growing conservative, evangelical, charismatic,
Anglican
podcast in the entire Fox Chapel area. Why, Ben, what a deep voice you have.
My throat wasn't clear enough at that point. So,
Adam Bright, welcome back to the podcast. Very popular guest from season 4, I can see. Also, season 5, if you include the time you donated your body to an effigy of Winston Churchill. I'm looking right behind you at a picture of you on the wall of guests. Welcome back.
Happy to donate to such a worthy.
That's it. And what an excellent. Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful image. It helps. And so, just by way of invitation to any of our listener, if you'd like to be on the podcast, we'd love to have you. It's always good fun. Ben's away. You're here. We had a coffee last week. You told me some interesting stuff, and that made you have to be here on the podcast. Thank you. We're in John chapter 3. We just finished the most famous passage in the world, and we're off, aren't we? We're off into a completely different setting pretty rapidly, it seems. You've observed that there's this kind of tension going on in the passage between two groups of people doing the same job a few miles apart.
Right.
What sort of strikes you just immediately from it? I know you've been reading it and thinking about it a bit, and so have I. What was your sort of first feeling at the passage, do you think?
There's a lot of confusing stuff in here. John makes some interesting analogies.
He does, yeah.
And references to things, and they come up with. I kind of like how he starts. We're setting the scene. We're moving away from Nicodemus here. Yeah. And there's a discussion that breaks out all of a sudden. So we've got Jesus and John both baptizing.
Yes.
Although interesting, it notes in the next chapter that Jesus and his disciples were baptizing, but Jesus himself wasn't actually the one doing the baptizing.
You spotted this in some notes that you prepared, and it is interesting because it says, after this, so this is chapter 3, verse 22. It says, after this, Jesus and his disciples went into the Judean countryside, and he remained there with them and was baptizing. So Jesus was baptizing. Fast forward to chapter 4, verse 1 and 2, right? And it says, brackets, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, close brackets.
Yeah, so, and I imagine in a more hierarchical kind of culture that they were living in, I mean, Jesus clearly had command of the baptizing that was going on.
Right.
So there's clear, I'm sure the Pharisees maybe did similar things.
Yeah.
Where they led a group of people to, or I guess Pharisees, Sadducees, whatever that hierarchical thing was. So.
Although it makes sense, like if you said, Lord Salisbury built a castle. I was like, well, you don't really think that this old dude in tweeds, was out there making bricks, do you?
Right.
What you mean is he pointed. And so I guess we understand that, but it's fascinating because in Christianity, we're often talking about the work of Christ being accredited to us. So specifically his work on the cross, right, is accredited to me. And here, it's the other way around. Their work of baptism is accredited to him, which is a really fascinating idea that I'd never thought of before.
Right, and actually it's a good inversion in terms of something will come up a little bit later whenever John starts speaking in the passage here. So,
yeah, well, this inversion thing is something that we've seen a bit. In the Old Testament purification rites, that you would invert a thing, you redeem a person through an inverted thing. You wash them white with blood. You cleanse them through death.
Well, just last week, I mean, the snake being held up on a stick. I mean, the snakes were going around killing people left and right. And then all of a sudden, oh no, look at this particular snake.
Yeah.
Which is, again, a kind of a graven image that God's saying, you should do this.
Don't make a graven image. Snakes are horrible, bad. Here's a graven image of a snake and you'll be fine. Yeah, crazy.
Right.
So I mean, all of this helps us understand the cross, which is the ultimate inversion or redemption through an evil thing.
Right.
It does. All of this idea of inversion helps us, I think, prepare for the cross. And some scholars have said that John's gospel is dominated by the cross. It's really thematic more than anything. And the theme is the trial or the cross. So, yeah, absolutely. You're right.
So we kind of get into the main bit of the passage. Our introduction is there's a discussion breaking out between, and it's interesting to me, we have the followers of John and a Jew. And so I'm fascinated by that distinction. Like we call out the followers of John as distinct from being Jewish here, almost here.
But they are probably Jews.
I would imagine. It's not like there's a lot of foreigners just wandering. I mean, there are obviously, but
I mean, I wonder if when it says a Jew, specifically it says a discussion arose between some of John's disciples and a Jew over purification, that this is someone who is representing Judaism and the Jewish view of purification, as opposed to they who are potentially representing some new view of purification in his eyes. Not that they're not Jewish, but just that this is a Jew doing Jewish things Jewishly and saying you guys are not.
Well, right. And this is the story of Jesus, is kind of correcting the impressions of the Jewish tradition and saying, well, okay, you're doing this for me.
Right.
Like, you're not doing this just for the sake of doing this.
And ironically, they're often correcting him. Hey, Jesus, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
And Jesus is kind of coming back and saying, well, not really, no. So
isn't it funny? We don't actually know what the argument is, right? I mean, discussion, that's very kind to call it that. But if we know anything about kind of Hebraic debate, it probably wasn't a discussion. It was one down from a fight.
Right.
And you know, we don't even know what it is. It's so funny. There's this hot topic of purification, but John doesn't go on to say, and the Jew said this, and we said that, and da-da-da-da-da, and we won. We don't even know what the argument was at all. Right.
Well, they do mention purification, and obviously John and Jesus are baptizing. So I guess today we don't necessarily, I mean, baptism is a symbol of us being renewed in Christ and some degree of purification, but I guess I wouldn't consider baptism to be like a purification process.
For us,
as
you mean?
the Jew, right, for us.
Yes. They did have ceremonial washings that they could do to convey ritual purification.
And it seems like in the Bible they make a distinction between like their ceremonial washings and there's baptism. So are they correlating the two here?
Right. I mean, I think so this is my guess, right? This is the making it up. It's a podcast, so this is me making it up, right? I think that he's misreading their actions. So they're doing a baptism, right?
Okay.
And he is seeing a purification rite and saying, hang on a minute, you forgot the da-da and you did it in the wrong order, and what about the thing, and da-da-da-da. And so he's in the detail of Jewish purification rites, which ostensibly look similar, right? It's people getting in water. And he's like, and John's like, no, we're doing something else. And worth noting that the thing that John's doing isn't quite the same thing as we're doing in baptism either, because Jesus isn't dead yet. So we have Christian baptism, right, which is a symbol of the death and resurrection of Christ. We have Jewish purification rites, and this John thing going on in the middle could easily be something else. You don't think so?
No, I'm fascinated to think that just...
What's John doing?
Well, it just the idea that baptism would be different while Jesus was alive versus after he died on the cross.
Well, Jesus isn't the first person that John baptizes. And when Jesus is baptized, Jesus is identifying with us. And therefore, baptisms after this are identified in him. The ones before Jesus is baptized are not only predate the baptism of Christ, they also predate the cross and resurrection. So it's weird to think of what that might symbolize if baptism is a symbol of burial and resurrection. It's
sure. So symbolism might be a little bit different, but I guess John was there to prepare the way for Jesus, and so my thought was like, his version of baptism was just, hey, this Jesus guy that's coming, like believe in him more than anything else. And
I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's probably closer to what we do than what they did. It's closer to Christian baptism than Jewish purification, probably.
Right.
And he's called the Baptist. But,
right.
But it is a strange thing that he's doing. It's certainly strange to this Jew.
Right.
And a lot of people are going out and getting it done. So that's threatening. Is the Jew just really annoyed that John is kind of taking customers away? I don't know. That would be a theme in this passage.
Well, but it's funny because a little bit, or just the next sentence, basically, I don't know who brings it up, essentially, but I think it is the Jew.
Right.
If we read it in context, he's like, oh, hey, that Jesus guy over there, he's getting more he's getting more customers than you are. So.
Is he just trolling them? Is he just out there just to mess with them? And he's like, hey guys, I don't know if you know, right, but your whole shtick, you're John the Baptist, right? That's your thing. You're Microsoft. There's this guy over here called Steve Jobs, and quite frankly, his stuff is cooler than yours, right? We could debate whether it's actually any good, because I know that you're not an Apple guy, but and I've put a sticker over mine to make you feel more comfortable. But is that what's happening? Is he just out there just to mess with them and say you're losing market share?
Right. Well, and he even rubs it in. It's like, oh, he was the same guy that you baptized just the other day. So
yes, I know.
So are you okay with one of your followers kind of usurping your power here? So it just
I work for a law firm called Ince and Co. And Mr. Ince had a trainee called Mr. Clyde. And Mr. Clyde went and formed a firm called Clyde and Co. And Ince and Clyde, these two firms, they were like two buildings apart for most of their 150 years. And they were mortal enemies, these two firms. Anyway, Ince and Co. has gone bust, and Clyde and Co. is still running the world and absorbing other firms. So there's that kind of thing of, we know what it's like when there's sibling rivalry. Is this Cain and Abel? Is this a kind of like a reenactment of that? We've got the jealous brother and the Jews trying to say, hey, look, this guy's better than you. And, what are you going to do?
Right.
That's an old story. It's the age-old story, isn't it, of fratricide? Is there some sense of which the default thinking here of the world would be, I've got competition.
So yeah, it does kind of seem like the Jew that's coming over here to discuss purification and baptism is just kind of rub it in their faces a little bit.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Hey, yeah, this other guy.
Yeah. And it's just I think he's goading them. And why not? I think that's part of their culture.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny. I think it's funny. And they fall for it, right? They fall for it because they came to John and said, Rabbi, which is, just an honorific of teacher. I don't believe that rabbinical titles are really established fully for about another 50, 60, 100 years. So at this point in Jewish history, any dude who's kind of got followers would be called rabbi. He who was with you across the Jordan, to whom you bore witness, look, it's actually, it's the behold word that I keep talking about. Slow down, zoom in, take careful notes. But normally, look, behold is edu, which is plural. And this is edo, which is singular. So instead of, hey, you guys all get a look at this, it's, hey, John, isolated on your own, go away and think about this on your own, which is, brood on this alone. Stew on this, right? Behold this horrible thing. Really fixate on it. Fixate, spiral on this. He is baptizing, and all are going to him, which is means all, everyone. Like our word pan everything, pan theology, panopticon. All those words. Right. It means it's pass. It means a totality. The totality is going to him. You've got no one left. Right. No one is coming to you.
Yeah.
Everyone is going to him. He has 100% market share. You lose. Go and stew on that.
Right.
Is what his disciples say.
And then this is the kind of the main piece of the passage. And I think John does an excellent job of kind of remaining calm and just kind of going into, like, slowly introducing the whole idea of his premise.
Yeah.
And he's first kind of saying, hold up, you guys heard me. I am not the Christ. I am not and you heard me say I'm paving the way for the Christ. So this is kind of the point of what I'm all about.
Yeah, you're in a sweaty about him doing well. I'm all about him doing well. So what's your problem?
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into it. Okay.
So he starts out clear, and he's kind of like, okay, remember that I've said this in the past. I'm not the Christ. And then it starts to get a little bit confusing because all of a sudden he jumps into this bridegroom analogy.
Yeah.
And honestly, well, living in a culture where marriage has declined, marriages have declined significantly.
Yes.
I guess the meaning there kind of loses. I mean, I've been married, and obviously it's an exciting time.
And you're still married.
And I'm still. Yes, the phrasing was a little odd there.
Unless this is going to be a really big deal of a podcast. What a place to announce it.
It's not a thing that I repeat on a multiple time basis.
Gotcha.
The marriage event happened once. So
no, I always find this renewal of vows concept quite funny, actually. It's like, well, they don't wear off, right? This is why we call them vows. I mean, I get why you would do it.
Right.
And I think it's very beautiful, but like we had a bishop who was always calling us in to renew our vows. I'm like, well, is this like a fixed term contract thing? Like what do they wear off? Like, is my ministry a bit dodgy? Like in week 51? Like, how does this work? What if I'm ill? Can I not do anything next year?
What is a fixed term contract? It's till death. So it's
till death is
nobody really knows when that heck's going to happen, but
right. Yeah.
So,
all right, good stuff. So we got the wedding, marriage, groom stuff.
So I first reading this, it made me think of. Do you recall the Da Vinci Code?
Yeah, I did actually read it. I can't remember.
I never read it. I never saw the movie. I read it, but I just remember there being a manuscript in the story about Jesus being married or something, and I was like, "Oh goodness, are we just dipping into like?"
Oh, and he goes into all this stuff. If I'm remembering correctly, that like chalice would be some medieval symbol of the women's genitalia, and like the sword and the sheath and all sorts of kind of stuff like that. And so the whole Lord's Supper was actually about a wedding, and it was all a symbol of how he'd married someone. And I mean, this is Dan Brown, right? Yeah, it's just made up piffle.
Right.
Absolute codswallop.
Although in terms of third culture, Greek myth had already been established by that point.
True.
And so I'm wondering if the listeners to John are saying, "Oh, so is this Jesus guy? Is he just one of those gods from Olympus coming down to mess with human women or something?" It just
that's possible, because the snake stick thing is very Greek. It's also Roman, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian, but it's very Greek. The whole idea of, is it Hermes, and the kind of symbols of snakes and sticks, and so there's no doubt that some of the Greek culture was starting to invade. And I suppose if you were looking to misunderstand Jesus, or you were just from a very alien culture like Greece, you might hear all this groom bride stuff and just think, oh, one of the gods has come down and is going to have sex with a woman.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not. That isn't the point at all whatsoever. But it's a fair misunderstanding. If a Greek philosopher was there, it's a fair misunderstanding. John hedges his weird stuff with two really clear statements. So he starts off with a really clear rejection of the whole premise of their concern. John answered, "A person cannot receive even one thing unless it's given him from heaven." So it's not my ministry. These are not my people. You're not my disciples. It's not my money. It's not my anything. Everything I have has come from God. It's a gift. Everything. Because he's God and I'm not. So why would you be worried about losing anything? It's a very general point, right? You shouldn't really be worried about losing your home or your job or your hair or your health or anything at all, because actually none of it is yours. Very helpful.
Right.
It's very helpful reset of our mind. If Christians are fighting over, I don't know, a business or something that goes wrong. And we know from 1 Corinthians that lawsuits amongst believers is wrong, brings shame on Christ. One way to resolve this, or begin to resolve this theologically, is to persuade both the parties to that argument. You don't own a share of a business. It's not yours, it's God's. He owns the business. Now, would you like something?
Right.
And that's great because we have this feeling, I earned it, I put in the hard work, it was my idea, I've pulled myself up by my bootstraps. This is all mine. And John the Baptist begins this whole thing by saying, it's not my ministry.
And it's nicely summarized in verse 30 here, where he says, he must increase, but I must decrease.
Right. Another really clear statement that hedges this weird stuff about marriage. Another really, really clear statement that needs almost no interpretation at all.
Which I think ties in really interestingly to the whole notion of a business and organizations, churches and businesses alike, like to have these mission statements or these purpose statements or things like that.
Yeah.
But it's funny when they're pushed to the wall, when things get hard, what do they choose to preserve?
Oh, yeah.
Do they choose to preserve kind of pursuing the mission?
Yes.
The purpose? Or do they choose to preserve themselves and say, oh, we need to survive to keep carrying on the mission? Because
Kat showed me a reel yesterday, and it's a kind of comedy drama 2-minute clip of a pastor and his operations manager in a meeting. Like, this is niche comedy, all right? Like, I find it really funny, but I can't imagine. I think there's a reason why it's not on primetime TV. Still, basically, they get given $1 million check for their church, and the pastor, like, they're just about to they're planning on what they're going to spend it on. It's parking lots and lighting and facilities, of course. And the pastor just asks at the end, by the way, where did she get all this money? $1 million, it's a lot of money. Where'd she get it all? And the ops manager says, oh, from her fans. So only from her fans. It's just only her fans who've given her this money. And he realizes, oh, we're going to have to tear this check up. We're not going to accept a check that's been has come from someone who's done something really immoral. And it's funny because they're debating. They're trying to get around it and saying, like, well, hang on a minute, what does she do on her OnlyFans account? And, what does she show and not show? And they're trying to wiggle out of it and find a way to accept this immoral money. And that is the temptation as a church. What can we get away with? What can we earn? What can we get? What can we turn a blind eye to? Because really we're trying to promote the gospel. And so it justifies a bit of dodgy behavior. Surely we could work around the IRS. We could do this. We could do that. It's a very funny idea that your great morality will be tested when your organization might benefit.
Right. Well, and it gets confusing too. Even the disciples, whenever the woman crushed or put the perfume on Jesus' feet right before he died.
Yes.
And they're going, oh, but we could have used it for this, X, Y, Z. We could have fed people or whatever, which, it's kind of hard to follow the Lord's.
People say that to me, like, you print bulletins every week. Is that not a waste of paper? I say, well, it's not a waste if it's for the Lord. We wasted wine on you when we did communion,
right,
and light bulbs on you when you saw the bulletin. Right. We could turn it all off. But there is this interesting thing that comes with this anxiety approach of, I'm losing market share, which would be that the organization becomes more important than the Lord.
Right.
Which, you observed, I think, in some of your notes as you were preparing for this.
So as a leader of Christ Church Fox Chapel here, I mean, how do you try and structure the organization, the church as a whole, so that we're pursuing Christ and not pursuing our own preservation necessarily?
Not pursuing CCFC.
Right.
Instead of. See, if I say that's an interesting question, that's like my way of saying, I can't answer that question. Right. I'm not sure I can really fully answer that question because as a sinner who is paid by CCFC and who gets some kind of referred credit for CCFC doing well, that is the essence of a real danger zone for me. I think what we can do is share leadership, number one. That may not be number one, but the first idea in my head is you can share leadership. So our staff verse is from Ephesians 5, and it's submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. So I love that idea that mutual submission is a way of putting Jesus first. So putting other people first is a way of putting Jesus first.
Right.
So what that means is when Nikki has an idea about, how we file some report or other to the IRS, and I don't like it because it's going to cost us money, I'm going to submit to her, and that will keep us straight, right? And likewise, Bridget wants to move the trash area to a certain spot or something. It's like, well, she's the operations manager. I do the jokes, right? So why mess with her job just because I'm the quote-unquote boss? So I think giving up power is a really important thing. The vestry is responsible for money and buildings and not liturgy or theology or doctrine. I'm responsible for liturgy, theology, doctrine, and not money or buildings. So the separation of powers is another principle, I think, that can help you. Because if you've got godly elders who've been elected and godly staff team who's been employed and interviewed and background checked and so on, right, and quite frankly willing to come and use $400,000 of skill to earn 60 grand, right, then probably the chances of you all going bonkers at once is slim. So that's one option. That's one way. But I think the bigger, better answer is to do with the proclamation of the gospel. I think if you just keep preaching the gospel over and over and over and over again, and really only the gospel, it helps mitigate that risk, because you have a whole congregation that's growing in Christ, and you guys are just not going to take it. Like if I do a bunch of stupid stuff, you guys are just going to be really unhappy about that, and you're going to tell me. Right.
Well, and I was thinking as you were talking about distributing power and those kinds of things, I think key to that too is just having an open ear.
Yeah.
And for everybody involved in leadership to have an open ear, and to actually be able to receive advice or correction or criticism, whatever.
Right.
And again, it doesn't mean you have to follow it all the time.
No.
But just with the willingness to kind of have the humility and say, "Oh, you bring up a good point. You may be like, I will adapt to accommodate your suggestion there." So,
yeah, absolutely. Because if one person is saying it, probably more are thinking it. And if your job really is to decrease and for him to increase, for Christ to increase, if that really is your aim, that Christ would be lifted up, then it becomes a lot easier to say, okay, what do I need to do here to lift Christ up?
Right.
And then third, I think would just be, I am interested in church management and things like that. If I were a computer programmer, I would invent a game called Church Manager. And it would be even more niche than the reel I saw last night. But I think it'd be really fascinating, like a Sim City type thing to run a church. And, I've painted the ceiling purple, or I've torn out all the pews, what happened? I moved the piano, what happened? We replaced the organ with, electric guitar, what happened?
Well, and then you could plant in this exact scenario, and then God, it's like, well,
I've abandoned the gospel.
God's determined that your church is no longer needed to project his mission in that area.
Exactly.
So what are you going to do? Close the church and follow God, or
here's my third point. The absolute number one easiest way to kill a church is to abandon the gospel of God. It is the easiest way to kill a church. Churches close with money in the bank all the time. And they lose congregants before they lose money. And they lose congregants when they abandon the gospel. And if you don't believe me, take a tour of the United States. Take a tour of Fox Chapel. Yeah. But if you want to see churches that are closing, that are going to half-time pastors and quarter-time pastors and merging with other parishes and all the rest of it, ask, is the gospel proclaimed in a lively way in this church? And it won't be. And so ultimately, the survival strategy here is preach the gospel. But me and my sin as a human on the payroll, I think I will be tempted sometimes to preserve CCFC more than the Lord, or to get obsessed with facilities over people. That's a really easy thing to do, because you can paint a wall and it looks really good, and all you have to do is budget for that and tell someone to do it, or do it yourself, right?
Well, it's a much easier metric to track.
So much easier.
There are numbers that we can say, we got X 100 people here this week, and we got 125 the next week. Yeah,
we're on the up. But actually, has anyone been saved? Has anyone had a marriage restored? Or has anyone been visited in a psych ward as they've come back to health over 2 years? what about someone with a really acute addiction? Have they been freed from that? And, that stuff is really hard to measure, and it's also really private. Right. Like, we're not going to stand up and say, hey, Joe Soap here is like, a horrible addict, and, he's not done that for 63 days. Let's give him a round of applause. This is not a, 12-step meeting.
Right.
So there's all sorts of stuff going on in secret, but that brings glory to Christ. And we'll see it one day. I have no doubt.
Right.
Sorry, that's a great question. It's a great question. But tell us about the marriage thing, right? So John introduces this weird idea by saying, look, nothing comes from you, it all comes from God, so it's not your ministry. And he rounds it off by saying, look, I'm going to dial myself down a bit and point to Jesus. Super clear.
Right.
But then we've got wackadoodle land in the middle. So let's go through it, shall we? Marriage stuff.
Well, if nothing else, I think the marriage analogy just paints a clearer picture for the people who are listening to John to say, okay, I'm the best man, he's the groom. Mm-hmm. So this paints a picture for them to say, for them to clearly get an idea of like, oh, what's the rank ordering here? Like,
okay. So he says, I'm not the Christ, but I've been sent before him. The one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom, who stands and hears him, rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. Therefore, this joy of mine is now complete. So that's the meat of his answer.
Right.
If the bread is 2 clear remarks, this is the Virginia baked ham of his remark. Probably inappropriate, actually. It's probably a cheese sandwich. It's probably not ham.
Right.
So, what does he mean? The one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. Therefore, this joy of mine is now complete. Okay, great.
Well, it's kind of following on with Jesus' parables. Like he's kind of telling a story that they could relate to and trying to say, okay, I'm the friend of the bridegroom.
Yeah.
Jesus is the bridegroom.
Right. So I'm like the best man.
Right, yeah.
At the wedding. I'm not the groom.
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
Helpful. Who's the bride?
Right, and the bride, and he kind of leaves that up in the air. It's just kind of like, I'm not sure how this analogy ties in completely, but...
I mean, Isaiah 62 talks of God being like a groom and the bride being like his people. And Hosea, this whole analogy of this prophet who's told to marry a prostitute is this symbol of God marrying a wayward people. And Song of Solomon or Song of Songs, depending what country you're from, same book, is all about these two lovers kind of falling in love, and it's an extended poem about us and God. So clearly the Bible has this idea of God being like a groom and the people being like, or the church being like a bride. Right. That's a pretty established Hebraic thought.
Well, a lot of these prophecies from the Old Testament were established, and then Jesus kind of comes around and says, I'm fulfilling all these, and the people, even the leaders, the Pharisees, aren't able to kind of make the connection. Right,
because Jesus himself appropriates this image, doesn't he? I think there's that, some Pharisees complain that Jesus' disciples are not fasting. And he said, well, why would you fast at a wedding feast when the groom is still with you? When the groom's gone, then you can fast. And he means, I am the groom. So he's claiming divinity.
Although the Pharisees were kind of falling into this trap we were talking about earlier of they were preserving the institution. I think they liked the power and authority they had.
Wow.
And so I think the legalism essentially was, okay, if we enforce the rules, if we're the keeper of the rules and we enforce these, that keeps us in power. So they're preserving their own institution above pursuit of Christ.
Are they zealous for God, or are they zealous for their own power?
Right.
And they're wrapped around each other so much that it's hard to pass that out.
So perhaps that's kind of the blindness that was occurring in them.
Great point. So John is calling Jesus the bridegroom, and the Old Testament calls the bridegroom God. So that's the thing. And so the bride would be implicitly the people.
Right.
Which is us. So, okay.
And as someone reading this 2,000 years later, sure, that makes sense when I've got the entire context around. I'm just thinking of the people standing there
Right.
At John the Baptist baptizing.
Okay.
Just hearing this off the cuff, I'm just like, I'm just wondering if they would necessarily make that connection as quickly. So
it's an interesting. So one of the scholars I read, a guy called Cruz, he has dug a little into first century Jewish marriage ceremonies, and they were quite complex things. They were quite lengthy and quite formulaic, and apparently one of the best men's jobs was to kind of put the bride and groom together. So he would like actually literally lead the groom to the bride. You know, like we would walk a bride down an aisle, right? Today,
right.
We walk the bride down the aisle to the groom. The best man is bringing the groom to the bridal chamber. Actually, walks him to the bridal chamber, and then this is where it gets really weird. As the bride and the groom go in to consummate the marriage, the best man hangs around outside the door, waiting to certify that the marriage was consummated. Potentially even for the groom to certify that the bride was actually a virgin and was not married to someone else or whatever, right? And therefore that the marriage was legit. So the groom is certifying the bride in this moment, but the best man is certifying what the groom has done or testifying, serving as a witness to the groom's shout of joy from the other side of the door that the bride is legit. And so now this is what one scholar says. So it could all be made up, but it's awesome because
maps nicely to John's whole
the friend of the bridegroom who stands where outside the door and hears him because he's listening, rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. What's the voice of the bridegroom? It's the voice of, all right, mate, guess what? It's all fine. You know, something like that. I mean, if for example, the groom was from Gloucester, which probably wasn't.
Probably not.
I don't know why a Gloucester accent came out in the middle of this for your axiomatic groom. And then he says, therefore, this joy of mine is now complete, right? Complete, filled or fulfilled. Job done. Right? I've got one job. My job is to lead the groom to the bride and to lurk around outside the door like a weirdo listening for them having sex. And then when that's done, I can go off and get on with my life again. And John is basically saying, the actual God groom is here. He's legitimizing the bride. He's going to consummate that marriage and be one with his church. And my job is simply to bear witness to this quote unquote marriage, this metaphorical marriage. And Jesus is legitimizing us. And therefore, I don't care that I'm losing market share because I'm redundant.
Right.
Mission complete. I'm not really a businessman. I'm more like a soldier. And my mission is complete.
Right, and I wouldn't say not so much redundant, but it's just like, no, I was here for a reason.
And I've achieved it.
And I've achieved it, right. So
Yeah. It's like, how's that as an answer? It's like, that's probably something, I mean, I think this scholar here who writes the Tyndale commentary is probably really right on with that. If there's another explanation, I'd love to know what it is.
Which does raise an interesting thought in terms of, so what's going through John's head at this point? So it's just like, okay, well, my purpose in life was pretty clear before Jesus kind of came into the scene. And now that Jesus is kind of into the scene, okay, well, what's the plan for me now, God?
Well, if decreasing is a thing that continues, if it's a continuum, then how low can you go?
Well, and earlier in the passage, we do see the little note kind of time stamping this event to say, this is before John was thrown into prison. So
yeah. Some scholars think that's a footnote for readers of Mark, for example, to situate this in the chronology,
right?
Because Mark will give you more detail on the death of John the Baptist,
right?
So it could be that. My feeling is it's more like ominous music in Jaws,
right?
Like we're in the opening scenes of the movie, and there's a durdum tune, right? And you're like, that's off, that's discordant, that makes me feel scared. I don't like that very much. And then we're back on with the story so quickly that we almost forget that we were unsettled a moment. But it's unsettling. John gets put in prison. It's not just that he loses market share, he loses his head. This is death, is where it's going for John.
Right.
I don't know if he knows that, but he must have known he was annoying people.
Well, yeah. So,
I mean,
but at least in this particular scene, John doesn't understand the parenthetical, or it doesn't see the parenthetical.
No,
so.
I know. And even the parentheses are kind of funny to me because, I mean, there's no Greek bracket in the original. There's not even spaces between the words in Greek. And so the editors of the ESV have very kindly put little brackets around it, which is funny. We'll probably finish with one thought. And so at the end of it, you get a little recapitulation of the famous verse. So in light of all of this, whoever believes in the Son has eternal life. Whoever does not obey the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God remains on him. It's very similar to what was said in the passage above. It's not quite identical. It incorporates this word remain, which is so key to John, to dwell. God dwells with us. The Holy Spirit dwells on Christ. Christ dwells in us. And now this idea of wrath or judgment dwelling on us is quite a powerful idea. Are you going to make a home in the wrath of God or the love of God?
Right.
Okay, that's a really interesting thing.
It is an interesting translation, almost seems like a translation issue, because he jumps from he who believes,
yes,
he who receives,
yes,
and then he who obeys.
Yes. It's a very good point. So you've observed it's just a strange translation. Whoever believes in the Son has eternal life. Whoever does not obey the Son shall not see life. And you're like, well, why are we saying obey?
Right, and cultural gap here again is just one of those, like, as a 21st century American, I can believe in something, but not necessarily obey in it.
Right. The NIV smooths it out a little bit. The New International Version says, whoever believes in the Son has eternal life, but whoever rejects the Son will not see life.
Right.
I think it's rare for me to praise NIV over ESV, but I think, honestly, that's an easier read. Because obey is a bit odd. You're like, well, surely we're not works-based salvation people. You mean I'm under wrath if I don't obey God? But I didn't obey God, so now what? I've sinned. I've disobeyed God. Does that mean does that mean I'm doomed? The obey word is tricky. So belief is pistis. Whoever believes in the Son has eternal life. Whoever trusts in the Son has eternal life, something like that. But when you get to obey, it's actually a slightly different word. It's apathon, and pathon or patho means believe. Apatho means disbelieve.
Right.
So whoever disbelieves. But there's only 14 examples of this in the whole Bible, and half the time it's translated disbelieve and half the time it's translated disobey. So it seems to be a word that is somewhere between, that's more on the practical end of belief than the intellectual end of belief.
More of a commitment or a faith kind of commitment to.
Yeah, whoever practices his belief or doesn't practice his belief.
Yeah.
So it's not just like, I think God is good or I think God is bad or whatever. In my opinion, God is like this. But it's more like, in my actions, I'm showing what I think.
Right.
Something like that. Still a slightly odd verse, isn't it?
Yeah, the whole section from 31 to 36 is, again, to a listener in the conversation with John, it's one I'd probably take home and ponder for quite a while.
So I've heard scholars say this about John generally, right? Some will say John's Greek is sloppy, right? It's just terrible. And he mixes words all the time. He'll say sheep, 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 lamb, for example, right? He does that at the very end of the book when he's talking to Peter, feed my sheep, feed my lambs. And some will just say he's lazy and he says sheep, he says lambs. He means the same thing. He's just mixing up his words.
So my other friend, Pastor Ben, not from Christchurch, talks about, he said that the Greek language that John uses is actually very simple, but he plays a lot with the double meaning of a lot of the words.
Yes, he's correct.
So
the other scholars would say, no, John's actually been quite deliberate here. He's developing an idea.
Yeah.
So a sheep is old, a lamb is little. A sheep is pretty tough-ish. A lamb is really vulnerable.
Right.
And so John is making this, he's intensifying the point, right? That my people are not really sheep, they're lambs. John's intensifying the point. And so they would say, you've got the same thing going on here, right? That there's belief, let's dial that up a little bit more and say, belief obey.
Right. Because even the demons believe that God is God. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So is it John with sort of linguistical ADHD, or is it John actually being quite sophisticated in intensifying his language? The fact that he keeps doing it leads me to believe it's deliberate.
Right.
Because we're led to believe that his dualism is deliberate, like light and dark and life and death and all of that, and that his opening 14 verses form a complex chiasm, which is in itself formed of numerous complex chiasms. And so he's mastered something that any Greek writer would be utterly amazed by. And you go from this, probably the most impressive piece of writing, significantly more impressive than Shakespeare, to like, oh yeah, he's just, dyslexic. Like, I don't really believe that. I think that John's actually being really, really deliberate.
Right. And when you consistently do it throughout an entire book, it's just like, I think he knows what he's doing here.
Exactly, yeah.
So,
yeah. I do believe Paul had dysgraphia when he says, see what big letters I write. I do believe that Paul's handwriting, I think Paul had a writing disability in the way that Moses had a speaking disability. I think God has actually uses the main speaker in the Old Testament has a stammer and the main writer in the New Testament has a writing disability. I think that's so God. But for John here, I think it's deliberate. I think it's clever. I think it's sophisticated, inspired, I'm sure, but very, very smart. Let's dial this up. Stop talking about what you think. What are you up to? What are you doing? Whose side are you on?
It is definitely the more complicated of the Gospels to parse through.
It is. I'm really grateful that you'd be with us. I don't know if you have any final thoughts, but this is really helpful.
No, I think that's the challenge to all of us, is for us to become less and Christ to become more. So
yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you being with us. It's awesome to have you.
Thanks for having me.
You've been approved because the Los Yetis are singing, the Heavenly Choir.
Okay.
I think they sound like this. Well, this has been a podcast of Christ Church Fox Chapel. So glad that you would join us. Very grateful, Adam, that you would join us as well. And thanks for stopping by. Love it. No one says the other words. Brilliant. Thanks for stopping by.